Okay, we are very excited. I'm delighted to welcome you to our last program in this year's Adirondack Zoom series, a collaboration between Albany Public Library and the Adirondack Experience. I'm Meg Kelly, Programs and Partnerships Librarian at Albany Public Library. I would like to begin by recognizing that Albany Public Library is situated on the land of the Mohawk, Haudenosaunee, and the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohicans. The Adirondack Experience is situated on the Aboriginal territories of the Mohawk and Abenaki communities. Indigenous peoples continue to live in our regions and practice their teachings and life ways. Tonight, we will look back at a remarkable moment in Adirondack history, Teddy Roosevelt's famous midnight ride to the presidency. This year marks the 125th anniversary of that event, and it's my pleasure to introduce Tony Kuchirachi, president of the North Creek Depot Museum. The museum, along with the Adirondack Experience and several other regional organizations, are thrilled to be marking the anniversary with commemorative events throughout the year, including tonight's Zoom program. Tony?
Thank you, Meg, and good evening, everyone. Our committee's been working since February 2025 to put together events and activities to commemorate this very special year, the ascendancy of Teddy Roosevelt to the presidency. We have an advisory committee who is headed up by former Governor Pataki, and we have others that are working with us. We have a series of events, and you can look at our webpage, which was launched a few weeks ago. And in it, you'll see all the events that we have. We have about 8 to 10 speakers over the course of the summer, including Paul will be joining us again up in North Creek. All the events will be at the Tannery Pond Center. And they were going to be people who have written or researched about Teddy Roosevelt in all aspects of his life, the women in his life that were very influential, his interest in birding, his interest in all types of activities, particularly his political life as well. So it's going to be a full program. And then the program begins on really September the 12th. Concludes with a parade down Main Street. And we have an absolute replica of Mike Cronin's carriage, which will lead the way. So we have a lot planned. I hope you look at the website and join us for a number of the programs that we have scheduled, and hopefully see you on September the 12th. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And now I'd like to introduce Paul Grondahl, the Opalka Endowed Director of the New York State Writers Institute at the University of Albany. Paul's an award-winning journalist who worked as a reporter for 33 years at Albany Times Union, where he still contributes a weekly column. He was named director of the Writers Institute in 2017 and is also a distinguished alumnus in arts and letters at UAlbany, where he earned a master's degree in English. Paul is the author of several books, including political biographies of Albany Mayor Erastus Corning and Theodore Roosevelt, titled I Rose Like a Rocket, The Political Education of Theodore Roosevelt. His forthcoming biography, Andy Rooney, A Lucky Life, will be published by SUNY Press in the fall of 2026. Throughout the evening, please feel free to submit any questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will take questions during a moderated Q&A later in the program. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Meg and Tony, and I'm amazed to see so many people on this Zoom. I want to say it's for me, but I know it's for Teddy Roosevelt, a larger-than-life figure who was always in the top 5 of presidents of all times when presidential historians are polled. And I really enjoyed the time I spent with Teddy researching this book, I Rose Like a Rocket, The Political Education of Theodore Roosevelt. It kind of early on begins in the Adirondacks and it ends in the Adirondacks. It looks at his early life. It looks at his early political career in Albany as an assemblyman. There's some great pictures we're going to show thanks to the Adirondack Experience folks, and I want to thank all of them for this great collaboration. So he was a larger than life figure, but he almost didn't get out of childhood alive. He had severe asthma He was hospitalized, bedridden. He was a skinny, sickly young boy, and his father wanted to help him build up his strength and kind of get past this severe asthma he had. And one of the things he had him built a gym behind their house, which was this beautiful house. They're a very wealthy family right by Gramercy Park in New York City on the east side, which I spent a lot of time. And it's a national historic site now and run by the national parks. But the thing that was most amazing to me is I was working at the Times Union, full-time reporter, and I cut down to 4 days a week. So Monday, I would drive over to Boston, to Harvard University, the Houghton Library, where they have an unparalleled collection of Theodore Roosevelt letters. They took them from this house at Gramercy Park so they could conserve them. And I would ask for the letters for each section, and I'd drive over on Mondays, and I'm holding Theodore Roosevelt's handwritten letters. Some of them have wood smoke on them, some of them have water stains from he was out canoeing or whatever. He had written to his big sister Bammy every Sunday from the time he was a teenager to the time he died, and he died young, at 60. And these letters were an amazing, amazing immersion into Theodore Roosevelt himself. His big sister was his protector, picked him up when he fell down, and he had a lot of failures. What really interested me as a figure to write about was that he probably had more failures than successes, and yet he had jobs that would be eight normal person's career, from assembly member to governor to vice president to eventually president. But in between, he was a war hero in the Spanish-American War. He was police commissioner of New York City. He was the assistant secretary of the Navy, all these things. And an amazing, amazing person. And his distant relative, Franklin Roosevelt. So I'm not going to give you a quiz, but there's been four governors who've made it to the presidency from New York. Two of them were named Roosevelt. You had Theodore early on, and then you had his distant cousin Franklin, who patterned his career very much on Theodore. Politically, Theodore had the square deal, and Franklin had the New Deal. Franklin also became a legislator, became governor, became Secretary of the Navy. He followed the path that Theodore had led. And Franklin comes out also in the top five, usually one or so above Theodore, but an amazing family. And Albany was very important to both of them. But the Adirondacks for Theodore, for Teddy, were really central. Like I said, he was sickly. His father wanted him to build up his strength, so he would start bringing him up to the Adirondacks. And when he got to be 14, 15, 16, he would let them go for a summer, and he was kind of mentored and taught and got very close to these guides, these really lifelong Adirondackers, these brilliant hikers, fishing, camping, wood cutting, mountain men, and he really took to them almost like surrogate fathers. He was a great letter writer, and there's a lot of letters recalling his time in the Adirondacks. He wrote articles about it. But one of the things he loved to do was natural history. So his very first book, and he went on to publish 30 some books, was this book right here. Amazing. He's a Harvard student. He's taking a summer between his classes, and he goes with his classmate, Henry Minot, and he does this whole study of the Adirondacks. So the summer birds of the Adirondacks in Franklin County was an amazing, amazing work for a self-taught ornithologist. And he also would bring back bird specimens and also wildlife specimens from the Adirondack, and he brought them back to New York City, to Gramercy Park, to his house. And his father was a very wealthy philanthropist, was the lead donor and the lead person that established the Museum of Natural History. So some of these birds and other flora and fauna that he brought back from the Adirondacks are in the collection of the Museum of Natural History in New York City. But what he really got was this love of the wilderness, of untrammeled forests, of where he could really kind of go inside himself. He was a big reader, a big writer. He liked solitude, and he loved the Adirondacks. And one of the things in this book, and he wrote about it so often, was the hermit thrush, a bird that's very well known in the Adirondacks. And he wrote a lot, but he had this line about the hermit thrush in his very early journals. And I'm talking like 16 years old. He was in love with the hermit thrush. He called it the sweet, sad music. And he said it seemed to fill the very air. And I'm sure some of you know the hermit thrush. I have heard it up there, but I was going to give you a little taste of it here. So we're all about multimedia here, and I'll call it up in a minute. There's, of course, there's YouTube and everything. So listen to this. If you know that bird. So that sound and that sense of coming from this, there you go. Beautiful. Thank you for putting that up. This small little bird made this beautiful sound, and it got into Teddy's soul. He wrote a lot about it. He wrote a lot about his time in the Adirondacks. And he went there for many summers as a young man. And like I said, he's a Harvard student. He spends the whole summer studying birds. And then I'm going to fast forward because I know we really want to talk about North Creek and about his midnight ride to the presidency. So this book, I rose like a rocket. The whole last part is this midnight ride, and I'm going to read a short section, and we're going to have plenty of time for a lot of questions. I love seeing this large audience. Meg's going to read out the questions, but I'll just read read the section where it's very dramatic. I mean, of all the transitions to presidency, this one was really amazing, and it took place in North Creek in your backyard. So I don't know if any of you have climbed Mount Marcy. The backstory was President McKinley was in Buffalo to be part of the Pan American Exposition, essentially the World's Fair, and they were kind of worried about security because there were anarchists afoot. There were people making threats, and his wife was nervous. And indeed, Leon Czolgosz, who was Eastern European, he was an anarchist. He was Emma Goldman follower, and he believed he needed to assassinate President McKinley. And he got very close with a gun and shot him in the abdomen. And the bullet went deep, and he seemed to recover, so he's in Buffalo. Teddy Roosevelt has accepted an invitation. He's the vice president. He accepted an invitation to give a speech at the Fish and Game Club over in Burlington, Vermont. So he's on the other side of Lake Champlain. And McKinley starts taking a turn for the worse. Roosevelt has visited him, and the reporters are saying, "Oh, look at Teddy. He's just itching for McKinley to die so he can become president." And he's reading this press, and he was always attuned to the press. And he said, I'm getting out of Buffalo. It looks like I'm hovering, hoping McKinley will die." So he had improved. So he had always promised his wife and his kids that we're going to take a real vacation in the Adirondacks. So he comes, and they go to the McNaughton Cottage, which was part of the Tahowas Club. Still there, it was a private club, 105,000 acres in 1901, and Teddy Roosevelt's uncles, who were wealthy New Yorkers, were part of it, and Teddy knew people, so he got invited, and his six kids. And there's great stories about these kids were wild kids. I mean, in Albany, they got in a lot of fights. They would throw snowballs out from the mansion at people passing by, and these kids were wild kids in this cottage. And I think Teddy's like, let me get a little break. I want to climb Mount Marcy. And he was always, the strenuous life. He believed, and he'd built himself up. So he's going to climb Marcy. But at this point, he's 50s. He's overweight. He's, not in the greatest shape. And when you climb it and approach it from the Tahowas Club McNaughton Cottage side, which I did to research this at the same time, September, which can be, kind of a shoulder season. When he did it, it had been raining. When I did it, it had been raining. And that's a lot farther coming in from compared to the Adirondack Lodge side. This is the other side. And I don't remember, but I know it's a long hike just to get to the base, and then it's up Marcy. I think it's 15 plus miles round trip walking. So this is the McNaughton Cottage where Teddy and his wife and their six kids stayed in 1901. So here we are, September 1901. As Tony said, the 125th anniversary is, I'm so excited about what North Creek is doing. But here he is. He's like, I'm going to climb Mount Marcy. His kids and wife are still at the cottage. He goes up with a few people, and McKinley has taken a turn for the worse. And the cabinet and people who are there in Buffalo say, again, this isn't texting on your phone. There was only one phone line that was even close to the Taoist Club, and it went to Aden Lair, which was 40 miles away. The only way you could get to, obviously on Mount Marcy, even now there's not good cell coverage, was by a telegram hand delivered. So that's what they did. They found this young man, really fit young man, and basically he had to sprint to give the message that McKinley is taking a turn. He's going to die, and be ready to come to Buffalo, essentially. So he gets that word, and I'll read a section. It's in the afternoon by that time. That's a great view. And he gets the word that he needs to not just get back to McNaughton Cottage, but to get back and possibly be the next president. He does not know at that time that McKinley is going to die. So I'll start right here. Let me find the spot. In the memories of Adirondackers, Roosevelt's midnight ride to the presidency had taken on near mythic proportions. Hunter's big bay was a powerful creature built for strength, not speed. Roosevelt kept urging Hunter to go faster, but the driver kept his speed within the limitations of the conditions and the abilities of the horse. Now, his wife had said, don't go. All the people said, don't go. So he got back from the climb of Marcy at about 5 p.m. And I always wondered, why did he wait hours and hours and didn't really make his move until midnight? And after hiking it as a person roughly the same age, a little bit overweight, a little bit older, his age, I was exhausted. And I think Teddy Roosevelt had to sleep and had to refuel and could not have gotten into a horse and carriage, which had to go 3 teams. I'll get into it. It's 40 miles. I mean, imagine with muddy, dangerous mountain roads, not even roads, kind of trails. So here we go. The pair traveled alone, averaging a steady 5 miles per hour. They reached the lower works roughly 2 hours after they set out. It was now just past 2 o'clock in the morning. Roosevelt drank coffee and made a telephone call. That's where they had the one line down there. He was ready to go after a short pause. All the vice president wrote in the Taoist Club register were these words: went up Mount Marcy. Hunter passed off to Orrin Kellogg, who drove the second leg of the relay. He had a 2-seat wagon and a team of horses that had not rested much, having already traveled 25 miles that day. Roosevelt got in the back seat with a rucksack, his only luggage. It was raining, so Kellogg offered the vice president an old raincoat to cover his legs from splashing mud churned up by the wagon wheels. He talked but little, Kellogg recalled. Kellogg formed a lasting impression from his brief, and there's the jacket. And Kellogg formed a lasting impression from his brief encounter with the vice president. Quote, Mr. Roosevelt was a very plain man. He was plain spoken. He wasn't any afraid, Kellogg said. You could drive as fast as you'd a mind to, and nothing scared him a bit. During their long hours together in the middle of the night, talk eventually got around to their reaction to the assassin. Now, this was the backstory. The people in Buffalo who tackled the shooter wanted to kill him there. And McKinley said, no, 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 don't have another homicide here. So, but Roosevelt said, I think I've had guzzled him first. Kellogg recalled Roosevelt telling him, which means like Teddy would have taken that assassin's life. 2.5 hours later, Roosevelt reached Aden Lair. Mike Cronin was anxiously waiting to begin the third and final leg. Cronin had received a call from Loeb, who was Roosevelt's secretary, who told Cronin that President McKinley had died. Loeb asked Cronin to keep that information to himself so he could break the news to Roosevelt at the North Creek train station. Cronin had 2 horses hitched to a small, covered surrey, and as they prepared to set off, a man handed the driver a lantern, which he'd have to hold with one hand. Cronin hesitated over whether it was worth the trouble, and that's the surrey and the two-horse wagon. Here, give it to me, Roosevelt said firmly, and they were off. A wan pool of light cast by the lantern, glinting off Roosevelt's spectacles, dappling the reins, and etching the heaving horse's flanks. 16 more miles of treacherous mountain road stood between them and the special train awaiting Roosevelt's arrival at North Creek. The horses slid around tight turns and stumbled along a particularly slippery and steep stretch. Cronin reined in the team. "Oh, that doesn't matter," Roosevelt told his driver. "Push ahead." Cronin turned in a record time of 1 hour and 41 minutes over the 16-mile stretch. It had been touch and go at times. Quote, "I tell you, Mr. Roosevelt is the nerviest man I ever saw, and I ain't easily scared," Cronin told the New York Herald. The first light of dawn softly suffused the roof of the station, and the waiting train wreathed in steam from its idling engine. Faces of townsfolk, alerted to the historic arrival, pressed to windows and shops and houses along Main Street. A knot of men stood on the station platform alongside Loeb. Cronin pulled his team of heavily lathered horses to a stop at the platform. Roosevelt hopped down and was immediately handed a telegram from Loeb. It was from Secretary of State John Hay, issued from Buffalo, postmarked September 14th, 1901, at 2:15 in the morning, and it read, "The President died at 2:15 this morning." It was just now before 5 o'clock in the morning. Roosevelt's midnight ride quickly became the stuff of legend in the Adirondacks, where Bill Hall, a great-grandson of Harrison Hall, he was the young man who sprinted up to deliver the telegram at Lake Tear of the Clouds to Roosevelt. Bill Hall composed this ballad. With the North Creek station 40 miles south, and with the dark road, they moved on out. His friends pleaded, "Please wait till morn. Give me a lantern. I'll go by foot," he scorned. The clatter of hooves broke the still of night, and the midnight ride stood for what seemed right. By 4:46, he arrived at the station. It was clear by now he would address the nation. His train was waiting to roll to take Ted back to Buffalo. He turned as he moved down the tracks to bid farewell to the Adirondacks. The Roosevelt Special, as the train was dubbed, and its crew had been waiting at North Creek for long, anxious hours by the time Roosevelt stepped down from Cronin's muddy carriage. Roosevelt's Macintosh was mud-spattered, and his light-colored fedora hat was darkened by rain. A Delaware and Hudson Railroad executive personally oversaw the crew and offered his private car for the special. At 5:23 a.m., the engine puffed, rumbled a few times, and got underway. Quote, "as fast as an old and experienced engineer could manage it." A crowd of correspondents had rushed from the freight house, but Roosevelt made no statement, leaving the reporters to watch the rear of the train receding in the distance to the south. And after that, he gets sworn in as Buffalo as our 26th president of the United States and one of our greatest presidents, according to presidential historians. So that's just a little taste. And I know many of you on this Zoom call probably know that trail, know that route. Imagine at night on muddy when it was, slippery with no headlights, obviously, and this little lantern driving kind of blind, extremely dangerous. We're lucky we didn't have a dead vice president along with a dead president. But that was Teddy Roosevelt, man of action, war hero, charged up San Juan Hill, getting shot at, was mauled by big game and hunting, and took a shot by another one that tried to assassinate him when he was vice president. And it hit his glass case, but it still grazed, and his big blood spot on the shirt, he refused to get a treatment, and he gave the rest of his speech. That was Theodore Roosevelt, and his ride down from McNaughton Cottage to House Club down in North Creek was part of amazing political history. So thank you. But Meg, I know a lot of folks have questions, and we can get to those if you want.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was very interesting. Yes, we do have some questions. The first question we have tonight is, why was Roosevelt in the Adirondacks in 1901, and what was he doing while he was there, and what connection does he have with the region?
Yeah, so as I said, he was vice president then. McKinley was in Buffalo for the Pan American expedition, and Roosevelt knew he wanted to take his family, had promised him to the Adirondacks. His wife had had some health things like, I really need a vacation too, Teddy, and said, I need a vacation. But he took a quick jog over to Burlington to give this speech, and then he comes back. And his wife and six kids have a vacation in the Adirondacks, and they're staying in that cottage in the private club. And everything was going well, and kids were running around. Somebody called them, quote, the little Indians, which probably not a term for today's audience, but in the time, it was accepted. They were wild little kids, so they were having a great time. And McKinley gets shot, and his family's still there, and he has to go out, obviously. But it looks like he's hovering. He's looking like he's hoping that McKinley will expire. And the reason he was in the Adirondacks, because I had mentioned as a young man, he spent formative, important years, being inspired by the hermit thrush, seeing what these amazing outdoorsmen and women, who grew up in that part of the world. He was very impressed with them, and he took a lot of early kind of mentoring and almost worshiping these people who could live in a very challenging and sometimes hostile environment. Certainly in 1901, it was not easy to get around or to hike or to do the backcountry. They didn't have Kevlar
No.
and waterproof everything and super light boots and all that. You can
Yeah.
see how he's dressed. He was, they dressed in suits, basically like three-piece suits when they went hiking. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for that. We have another question. There's a long-standing piece of folklore suggesting that Theodore Roosevelt learned of President McKinley's death while en route to North Creek. Has this ever been historically documented, or is it more a myth than fact?
Well, I just said he got the telegram, so he knew once he got to North Creek. I believe that Cronin kept the confidence that he was told when he took the phone call and said, "Don't tell him until we get him to the train station." So, I think in that little ballad says 4:46 a.m. I think it was 5 a.m. right around that. That's when he found out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Why did Roosevelt not take the oath of office immediately upon learning of McKinley's death in North Creek? And where did he ultimately take the oath and under what circumstances?
So there were a lot of people, and I include this, there were people waiting, reporters, and thinking he might just take it in Albany because he had been governor there and it was a major state, a state capital. But Buffalo was where the cabinet was assembled while hoping McKinley was going to rally. And he did the first couple days. They were going to try to take the bullet out, and they kind of pushed it into his gut and made it worse. And so they were all there. And there's a place called the Milburn House. He was um, I don't know, I guess you'd call him a important Republican person. He had this mansion. It's a historic site now. You can still see the room, and they've kind of recreated where he took the oath of about, I don't know, 8 cabinet members in there. And that's where he was officially sworn in as president.
Okay. I have another question. Where was Theodore Roosevelt when he first learned of the assassination attempt on President William McKinley, and how did that news initially shape his movements?
So he was in the Adirondacks. He had just come back he was just there give a speech and to come back across Champlain. And, his family's at McNaughton Cottage, and he gets this news and he has to get out to Buffalo. And initially, it was like, oh, he's doing better. He's going to recover. He's doing okay. And all the press was there, of course. It's a major story. It'd be like today where CNN and everyone else shows up. And so at the time, flooded with reporters. And they're like, Teddy, you're kind of hanging around here. Are you going to be president? Do you want to be president? And he knew it was bad optics. He was a guy that understood how to work the press. And he was starting to get those kind of negative commentaries like, oh, over-eager Teddy, and, maybe hoping McKinley kicks off, so he's kind of hanging at his bedside, just waiting to become president. And he realized, and his advisors too said, like, not a good look for you to just keep hanging out in Buffalo. He seems to be getting better. Go back, enjoy your family in the Adirondacks, and we'll call you. And when McKinley is back. But the two of them were not friends. They were not political allies. Teddy got that job because the political boss of New York, very powerful, Boss Platt, saw what Teddy didn't play by anyone's rules. He was a troublemaker. He broke all the norms. He went after big corporations. He went after the big donors that Republicans wanted. And Platt said, like, what can I do to get this guy under control? He doesn't take orders. He doesn't listen to the Republican leaders. And they said, vice president. It's like a no-show job. There's nothing, you go to some state funerals and things like, the term was, we're going to put Teddy on the shelf, where he had no more, he didn't run the most important state in the country as governor. So he gets shifted over there, and then this happens. And the political operative at the time, Mark Hanna, who was a lot like Karl Rove for Bush, his great line was, I think it's a bad move because, I know he's out of control as governor, but you put him in the vice president. He said there's only one heartbeat between that madman and the White House. And McKinley's heart gave out, and he was something of a madman in people's estimation because he didn't play by the usual political rules.
Yeah. So you said it was he learned by telegram. Could you speak to the communication limitations of the time, particularly in the Adirondacks, and how those constraints affected Roosevelt's awareness of McKinley's condition and the urgency of his return?
Right. That's a good question. I tried to cover that, but Aiden Lair, which is still, I believe it's still standing, a little historic small house. That's 40 miles away almost. Actually, it's 30 or so. So the closest phone call, the telephone line went to there. And you had to then relay um, with telegraph or with a message with a driver or a horse team back up to Howes. And certainly the only way to get a message to him up at Lake Tier of the Clouds was with a strong hiker, woods person. And they got this young man to basically sprint up to give him that message, a folded piece of paper saying, you need to get back. McKinley's
Mhm.
condition has become grave. But he wasn't dead at that point. But it took a long time to get, it wasn't like instant messaging today or whatever, it took a while.
Yeah. When did Roosevelt say, "Speak and walk softly and carry a big stick, and you will go far"? And what was the significance of its meaning at the time? And did it influence him during his presidency and later in life?
Yeah, that's a good question. He borrowed that from an African proverb, and it kind of for him summarized, walk softly but carry a big stick. Um, he was in certain ways like the current president in that he was a warmonger. There's no other way of saying it. He wrote these incredibly passionate things about being in war and his life on the line, moment by moment, bullets whizzing by him. He pushed his sons. Two of his sons died in military service. One crashed in a plane in World War One, and he tried to get himself into World War One as an old man who obviously was gassed and too tired coming down from Marcy. He relished war and vanquishing foes, and he really was pushing McKinley often to kind of declare war, not unlike today. And like, is there really justification for that? He was the one that said we need to spend more money on the Navy when he's Assistant Secretary of Navy. And he, the head secretary had been away for a while. I was like, Teddy, what did you do? Like, you ordered all these warships. You practically want us to go to war with a bunch of countries. And he had this deep fixation of war, and that actually goes back to also his childhood, just like his asthma turned him into a strong, athletic. And he wrote a lot about this. During the war, his father was very wealthy, and wealthy people could pay poor people to take their place.
Mhm.
And essentially, that's what his father did. And he loved his father, but he always felt when it came to putting your life on the line for what you believed in your country, you took a pass and used your money to get out of it. And that really stuck in his psyche. And he he loved war, and he put his sons in harm's way, and two of them died, as I think. So there's no way of sugarcoating that. And again, it's a different time, obviously, but he was, there's a reason in today's political climate that they took his statue down in front of the Museum of Natural History because he's astride a horse and he's imperial and colonial, and you know, um, we're going to take over weaker countries if we want them, and that was his mindset. And you can't really, I mean, I present it. You can't really rewrite history through today's norms, but certainly some people have, and his statue in this heroic conquering way, also with some indigenous people there, that doesn't sit well with today's New York that, you know, elected a new mayor, Zoran Mandami, and it's a new world order in a lot of the country, as we know. And Teddy would have been really kind of an outlier, but I think he would have changed with the times too. We're talking he grew up in the 19th century and came into power in the early 1900s, a different world than what we have today.
Yeah. I have another question. How do modern audiences reconcile the progressive achievements of Teddy Roosevelt with his more controversial views and actions, particularly on race, imperialism, and American expansionism?
Very good questions. Again, I only took his early career. I've no read a lot about his presidency. I didn't research it and write my own book on it. There's a beautiful two-volume, um, you know, biography on him by a great biographer. And I wanted to find something different to write about because if you do a search on Theodore Roosevelt, you'll find hundreds, if not thousands, of books. And I didn't think anyone had really taken this early time in Albany where he really kind of created himself. But no, you can't really excuse it from a modern sensibility. The racism, um, I found, as with Mayor Corning, who I wrote about, maybe evidence on both sides. Theodore Roosevelt did have Booker T. Washington to the White House, the first time a president had invited a black man to the White House, but you can also find certainly racist, misogynistic. I mean, he was of his time, and it's hard to judge by today's standards of any person or any political figure. So some of the things, yeah, we would find distasteful, but in terms of progressive, he was a Republican from a wealthy family, and his own family, and like I said, his political bosses did not like the direction he leaned, which was progressive. I mean, there's a great book called A Traitor to His Class, and wealthy white privileged people did not like him kind of leveling the playing field. He was the first one that really got the 40-hour work week for state workers when he was governor in 19 early 19, 1898 to 1900. He was the first one that cleaned up the rivers. It was great. I include a lot of it in his early time in the assembly and as governor, before he became president, cleaning up horribly polluted waterways, the Cateros Creek, the Hudson River, where big corporate interests and factories were allowed to just pollute anything they want. And he cracked down, fined them, changed the laws. He created more open space and natural parks than any president. And I really think it was his time in the Adirondacks that gave him that impetus that this was special. You can't hear the hermit thrush in Midtown Manhattan or, where he grew up. You can't get out away from everything and be with your thoughts the way you can in those mountains. So I think that was really formative to him, and a lot of the things that he started and put in motion as assembly member and then as governor, he carried on the national level as president. But I don't forgive a lot of his views and a lot of his actions, but I also don't put a 2026 lens over his 1901 person. That's not fair.
Thank you. I have another question. Did Teddy Roosevelt have any role in conserving the Adirondacks as he did in many places nationally?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any national parks right within the Blue Line or the things, but even as governor, he was all for conservation. And again, of his time. He's considered a great naturalist, but when he studied those birds, the way they studied it was to shoot two of every variety.
Mm.
That's the Victorian way, you know? So he killed a lot of animals to be a preserver. And the conservationist was for rich people. Let's not forget that. There's still a lot of these private, I mean, Taoist Club, 105,000 acres for only a few rich people. So you can put that on him too, but that was of his class, and that's, I mean, the Adirondacks. I don't have to tell this audience, it was a lot of very wealthy, still is a lot of very wealthy New York City people that own a lot of it, and public access is important. And Teddy, he did fight for that, but he also liked what wealth and his position and privilege gave him. He wasn't staying, there wasn't public campgrounds then, but he stayed in the private place in the private lodge because he was rich and he knew rich people. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any truth that the Taoist Club member Dr. George Brewer was the Roosevelt family physician and suggested that the family visit the club as one of the Roosevelt boys had respiratory problems that would benefit from Adirondacks clean air?
I mean, that's a little early when Trudeau and the cottages and the tuberculosis and sanitarium, but so his dad, he had severe asthma. Now this was um, the cure when he was a boy in Manhattan was to get him in a carriage, get him driving really fast, make him drink really strong coffee as a little boy, like taking the lungs, but definitely the mountain air. It wasn't to the point where Trudeau and it had really become, you know, a, I mean, that came later, but they definitely knew there was good for a boy who had bad lungs and had asthma to get up to the mountain air, definitely.
Thank you. So we have Mike Cronin's great dad granddaughter watching. She
Wow.
brings up her great aunt's book, Theodore Roosevelt's Night Ride to the Presidency by Eloise Cronin Murphy. So she's
That's a
on my.
great book. I looked at it. Welcome. I love that
Mhm.
we've got an
Yeah.
ancestor here. Yeah, yeah, that's a great book, and yeah, the Cronin family will forever be etched in national political history because of that ride.
Wow. Did Theodore Roosevelt ever visit the Adirondacks again?
Um, I didn't dig into all his letters after he became president, and there was all the letters in the Houghton Library. They're there for somebody, and I'm sure I could look that up. I think he did. I know he came to Albany when they created the New York State Museum in whatever 1906, and then his whole late. I mean, not even addressing that, but he tried to create the first third party, the Bull Moose Party, because he said I'm done with politics, and then he missed it, and then he had a falling out with Taft, and Doris Kearns Goodwin writes that book, a beautiful book. And yeah, these were people that knew each other from Albany, just like I write a lot about early on. They were Harvard classmates. Hearst, William Randolph Hearst, my publisher, my friend George Hearst publishes the Times Union. It was his great great grandfather, and they were rivals. And both of them knew in the Spanish American War, whoever got there would get the headlines. I mean, they sent correspondence. Remington was there. They sent artists, and it really was jingoism, like not unlike today. We're going to go kick some ass in this foreign country and take it over. And Teddy was all for it, and so was Hearst. They were both rich Harvard boys, and they wanted to get there with their regiment and claim the glory. And um, so all throughout their career, they were always kind of sniping and fighting at each other. And there's even some letters when he's governor and things. He's still got a bone to pick with Hearst because Hearst wanted to get to be the war hero first, and Teddy beat him to it.
So speaking of the letters, so what are your major insights you took from reading Roosevelt's letters?
One that Like I said, he had 8 careers that any average person would have been very happy with. I mean, he could have retired just as a writer and be considered a great writer. When you see his letters, and this is a guy who was traveling all over the country and the world. He's going down the Amazon. He's hunting big game. He's tramping. I mean, a typical day when he was an assemblyman was like, I've got 3 hours. I'm gonna go take a hike. And it wasn't a hike, it was a power walk. And I'm living in Gildan in the Pine Bush where I used to like to come because it was a natural area. And from the capital to here, it's about 16 miles round trip or something. He'd do that in an afternoon break from the legislative session. And he would, I have a cup I got at the Harvard Club where he would stay, and it's about the size of a large soup bowl. He would fill that up with coffee, put a bunch of milk in, get a thick slab of butter, thick slab of bread, and he would just like fuel himself and then just go, 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 go. The guy went and he wrote hundreds and hundreds of letters. There's these beautiful volumes to just his children. And there's the volumes of his collected letters, I think are 10 volumes, and he wrote enormously. He wrote hundreds of freelance magazine articles about hunting, about fishing, about traveling. He wrote, like I said, almost 36 full-length books. He was unbelievable in terms of his energy and his output. And I think it goes back to a boy who almost died and realized he wasn't going to waste a minute, and he built himself up. And these letters are just heartbreaking. I mean, he talks about his depression with his sister. The other thing is his wife and mother died within 24 hours of each other on Valentine's Day. His young wife, he ends up remarrying because he's got kids and he has more kids with her. But that just took the wind out of his sails. He just shut down. He went out to the Badlands, which I've been out there, and he tried to be a cattle rancher. And he talked about the black horse following him, this depression. But he would write to his sister, and his sister was like, "Come on, Teddy, your strength. Pick yourself up, man. Pick yourself up." And he always did, and he got through that. But he was very honest about obviously, who wouldn't be? Your mother was very close to his mother. He loved his young wife, and they both die unexpectedly from different diseases, and he has to deal with that. And then he comes back. He comes back as a politician. He lost as many races as he won. I mean, he lost. He got crushed. He ran for mayor of New York City. He ran for other positions, and he wrote this great. I could call it up, but it's The Man in the Arena, and it's basically, I'm sick of these critics who just like to complain from the cheap seats about politics or whatever. It's like, you get in the arena, you take some dirt, you get knocked around, you get bloodied up, and then you can complain. And you basically, if you haven't been in the arena, shut up. And it's like, I've been in the arena, and you got to respect that guy. He picked himself up from so many failures.
Thank you. Um, so here's another question. Do you think Roosevelt would today side with the current president on taking back the Panama Canal, which which he was the impetus in having built?
Yes. And he legitimately got the Peace Prize. And I think this
Mhm.
president either made one up or printed one or whatever. But again, different times, different centuries, but he wanted to take what he wanted. Uh, American exceptionalism. We deserve to take these poor countries, whether they had oil or whatever the argument is. I don't know what the argument is today, but he was somewhat aligned in that we were the great power and we could take what we wanted and what we needed. And
Mhm.
he did broker some truces, but he also did get the Panama Canal through. But he would not also stand for. I mean, I can't say for sure if he would have invaded or whatever, but he would not have wanted a country to hold world trade hostage. He would have gone in with his navy, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which again, you can judge it from how you want, but from everything I know about him, I've read about him, I think he would walk softly but carry a big stick. He liked to use the stick when he had to.
Mhm. Back to the midnight ride. When and under what circumstances did the rest of his family join him after he was sworn in as president?
Yeah, that that took a while. They were uh they had their place in Washington and dealing with six kids, rambunctious kids. The wife had had some health issues. His her family and things would help, but it was a full-time job. She wasn't really like the first lady today that was involved in a lot of things. His daughter was. Edith was a very outspoken, funny, loved the Washington social scene, was just so quotable, would give it back to her dad, was kind of a smart aleck. She kind of stood in for a lot of those things. I mean, yeah, his wife, try raising six kids. That's not easy, and they were wild. Yeah.
What was the route to Buffalo from North Creek, and how long was that journey?
Yeah, so it was train. I mean, it didn't go as fast as today. So he stopped very briefly in Albany. He took on some more mail and things. He didn't get off the train. So I'm guessing from North Creek to Albany and then to Buffalo, it certainly had to be 4 to 5, 6 hours, probably about what it would be driving today. They certainly weren't going like high speed, like they can get to New York now in 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I'm gonna guess at least double that. I'd have to look that up. I have it somewhere in here. I end up in Buffalo, but definitely several hours.
Mhm. Can you tell us about his future relationship with the Adirondacks after being president?
Yeah, like I said, he he was always had so many things going on. He didn't have a lot of time to relax and spend time there like he did. He might have come back before, but his health was getting a challenge because he had a tropical disease from going down the Amazon. He almost died there. A very again like a midnight ride with his son. His son basically had to bail him out. He was going to die, and very The River of Doubt. She's a beautiful Candace Millard. I think a beautiful book. No, this guy took risks. This guy took a lot of risks. He could have been dead many times in combat, in dangerous trips, in riding down at night on muddy roads in a carriage from uh, you know McNaughton Cottage to North Creek. That's the way these guys know they're real Adirondackers. He's a New York City guy, who's spent some time up there. They're saying, "Don't do it, Teddy, don't do it." And he said, "Damn it, we're doing it." You know, he was lucky he got three experienced people to drive him down. If he would have tried to do it himself, he probably would have killed himself.
Back to the travel from Mount Marcy to Buffalo. Did he stop in Ballston Spa on his way there? There was a long time story that he had stopped at a site of Carney's restaurant in Ballston Lake. I heard this was debunked, but just wondering if he had made a stop somewhere else in the Capital District area.
Debunked as far as I know, and what I mean was really stopping in Albany, and they took on some things, and his secretary joined him and other people, and then he went straight to Buffalo. I've never heard that. I would,
Mhm.
again, if somebody has good evidence, I'd always listen to it, but I never saw that. It's kind of like George Washington slept here.
Mhm.
A lot of those on tighter scrutiny follow. I had never heard that. He certainly wouldn't have stopped to eat in
Okay.
Boston Spa when he was trying to get there. He knew they were waiting for him to be sworn in.
All right, we're going to do one last question. Um, what are the major insights you took from, oh, we read this one, sorry. Oh, um, I'm going to take a different one. What other books did Teddy write about the Adirondacks?
That was the main one, his very first book, and it's kind of a pamphlet. It's a list of all the birds with description and things. He wrote some articles about the Adirondacks. He wrote a lot of history books, an early one like The War of 1812. He loved military history. Like I said, he was in love with war and the danger and put his sons in harm's way, and they both got killed. One
Mhm.
had a heart attack later, but the one plane got shot down, crashed. So that was hard to kind of understand. But again, my takeaway, my understanding, seeing all the letters that I went through was like he never forgave his father for buying his way out of um, fighting for, he wasn't fighting for his country, but he was fighting for the Union Army, and he
Mhm.
paid. And there were a lot of people that did that. Wealthy people could pay to get a surrogate to go in their place. And he never forgave his father for that, which he
Mhm.
loved, and it's why he wanted to be in the fight.
Mhm.
He called it
I
his
think.
crowded hour. That was one of his books, writing about being at war and charging up San Juan Hill and getting his glasses shot off and seeing men die around him. He's on his horse, go, go, just like bloodthirsty. And he said, it's like anyone who's been in that thing, if you've like about to car crash, everything stops. And it was like, he felt like he lived a lifetime in 1 hour. And he loved that adrenaline, being on the knife edge of living and dying.
Mhm.
And this is, I think he got that for going down the Amazon. I think he got that on these big game hunting trips. And I think he got that listening to the hermit thrush. That was not life and death, but it was something that touched him deeply. And he was a
Mhm.
deep thinker and a deep writer, and obviously a flawed person if we look at him today. It was a time of expansion, colonialism, and imperialism, and he wanted to take. He wanted to take if
Mhm.
he could. This country deserved it, and his record in the Philippines, his record in Cuba, his record in other parts of the world, were not something that we would applaud today.
Mhm. I think we have time for one or two more. Can you speak to Teddy Roosevelt's relationship with the Prine family and the Great Camp Santanini?
Santanoni. Yeah,
Santanoni.
Santanoni. So I cover that more with the Corning family, the Prine family, or big lumber family, and they knew the
Mhm.
Corning family. Corning family goes way back, one of the wealthiest families in New York in the 19th century. But those people all knew each other. In my Corning book, it was really Maine, because Corning family was wealthy and had a big estate right next to Nelson Rockefeller. And the reason we have the Empire State Plaza is because these guys hung out in the summer at this. There was golfing, there was tennis, the Prynes and the Roosevelts moved in that upper circle. Most of us here on this call, we're not going to get the invite to the Tahowas Club, but Theodore did, and the Prynes did. They had their own great camp. So, wealth had its privileges, and the Roosevelts were very wealthy.
Mhm. Did Teddy Roosevelt write any other books about the Adirondacks?
No, not specifically. He wrote articles in a lot of his letters and his kind of essays, and he didn't really particularly write a memoir, but he told stories of those mountain men he knew, those guides, the people that took him hunting and fishing, the people that his dad sort of entrusted him to for the summers. That, like, yeah, we'll man him up, we'll toughen him up, and he did. He toughened up, and he when he was in the governor's mansion, he took over the top floors and turned it into like a sparring ring, and he would hire professional boxers. Again, very foolhardy. His wife didn't like these ideas, and he's like, he would box and fight real fighters. He was a wrestler at Harvard. He was a tough little guy. He was my height. He was 5'8". By the end, he'd put on, he was 200 plus or something. He'd bulked up. You see some of those pictures, but early on, he was a tough, like 160 muscle and an athlete. And some of that was from those summers in the Adirondacks.
Thank you. Excuse me. Um, what biography about Roosevelt do you recommend most for people? You got one?
Just kidding.
Okay.
Now, I mean, I could look on my shelf back here. I got a lot, but uh, I don't know. I think people go at all kinds of different angles with them, but the two volume, I got to know Edmund Morris. Look up his two volume. I mean, it's a lot, but nobody has covered Teddy Roosevelt better. And his books were called The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt and Theodore Rex, sort of up to the presidency and the presidency. And I met him. His wife wrote a really good biography of Teddy's wife, and but here's a high level biographer, kind of in the category of Chernow and McCullough and people that I've all met. We brought to the New York State Writers Institute, but Edmund Morris spent about 30 plus years only on Theodore Roosevelt, and he said, I've met him. We had him at the Writers Institute. He said, I have a very nice townhouse in Manhattan and a very nice summer home thanks to Theodore Roosevelt. And it's clear, all the people on this, I love that these people you're hanging in here because Theodore Roosevelt is endlessly fascinating. And Edmund Morris spent his whole adult life, really the only two books. So he was the one that got hired and paid a lot of money to do a biography of Ronald Reagan. And he's like, there's no there there. I've spent 40 years on Teddy Roosevelt and I got Reagan now. So he did this thing called Dutch and he kind of had to invent things and things. And I mean, he got paid and he took the money, but there was nothing like Theodore. That's the best. If you're going to read, it's 1,000 pages, 2 volumes, but you will get everything you ever want to know about Theodore Roosevelt. But that Candace Millar River of Doubt is beautiful. Doris Kearns' book, The Bully Pulpit, of him later in life trying to challenge Taft and create this bull moose party, is very interesting. There's some great books, and get the Cronin book. Let's give that a shout out again. It's so great. Is it a great granddaughter or great granddaughter? You're
Uh,
muted now, I
the
think.
yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, the great granddaughter.
that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
I love that. That's really
very cool.
special. Thanks for
Yeah.
signing on.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. We really appreciate all your time. And I think that's a great question to leave it on, the
Yeah,
biography of
and
Teddy
make sure
Roosevelt.
this summer, or go to the website with the North Creek and Tony's work. And it's really great that the Albany Public Library, who I've known and worked with many times, collaborate with the Adirondack Experience. But I think Liz has something to add here too.
Yeah, I just was going to thank everyone for joining us this evening for the final program in our Adirondack Moments Zoom series. It has been our pleasure to share this program series with Albany Public Library and, of course, all of you, our viewers tonight. So, as spring returns to the region, we invite you to visit us at the Adirondack Experience this season. Our opening day is May 22nd. And you can, of course, continue exploring Adirondack stories year-round through Albany Public Library. And if tonight's program sparked your interest, we would be delighted to see you at our Teddy Roosevelt themed trivia night on Thursday, May 14th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Timber and Time, which is located at the station in the Skible Park in North Creek. It is free to play, it's great fun, and there will be prizes. So just Paul and Tony and
I
Meg, our
wish I could
sincere.
join that trivia night. I mean, and I
Oh,
would say bully. I had a friend that could do a great Teddy Roosevelt imitation, but I know Tony, I think, is going to have a reenactor, which is very cool.
we will. We will have a reenactor doing the welcoming remarks, and Paul, I'm sure you do very, very well at that trivia night. Um, and for everyone still watching, again, we'd love to see you there. Our trivia nights are a lot of fun. So sincere thanks for everyone for a splendid evening and bringing this year's series to a really nice conclusion. So until we meet again, we wish you a wonderful spring, and we look forward to welcoming you in person at the museum and next season for a new program series. So on behalf of the Adirondack Experience, I'm Liz Bellier, the Public Programs Manager, and thank you, everyone.